What's up? What's up? What's up? It's John here from JJSC Tech. It's a late night stream. Yeah. What can I say? It's late night. I wasn't able to stream past Sunday because I had some stuff to do. I had a little shindig that I had to record. A friend invited me because he was low on staff, so he wanted me to help him with some video work. So I did it, and I'm here today. Now I'm here today because my man Walter Jeanette, he's getting more into cinematography, videography, and it's good. It's great. I love it. The more videographers that we have, the better, especially in the church setting. And, make these videos look more professional, make them look more cinematic, even on the streaming aspect, make them look more cinematic as well. So I am going to add to what he was speaking about. Check out his channel, Walter Jeanette. He was more so speaking about the lighting aspect and exposure, which is very important. I haven't really spoken about lighting that much, but I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna get more into that. Lighting is very important. Oh, I got a hole in my shirt, bro. Oh, well. It is what it is. Lighting is very important. Exposure is very important because you don't want too much of a heavy contrast. Contrast not meaning the difference between, the difference between light and dark, but not in the photography aspect. More so the difference between the lights and the dark, how bright the light is and how dark the shadows is. So contrast plays a big role in separating your subject from the background. You can play with contrast. It's not only lighting up the subject and darkening the background, or darkening the background and lighting up the subject. You can have contrast in colors. You can have contrast in different, and what's in the background, having the background a different color and have your subject a different color so the subject can pop out. But I'm not getting into that right now. I am going to get into the difference between streaming on a Red and recording on a Red. Now, some people might be saying, like, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have a Red camera. I don't think I'm going to ever be able to get a Red camera. Don't think like that. Because if you don't own a Red camera, you might want to rent a Red camera. You know what I'm saying? So you still got to know how to use a Red camera. And not only a Red camera, it's also cameras that can shoot RAW. Now, cameras that can shoot RAW are more so the cinema cameras. So that's your Reds, that's your Arri Alexas, that's your Sony Venices, Sony Burano, maybe. I don't know. But things like FX3, FX6, those aren't really cinema cameras because they can't really shoot RAW. They shoot S-Log. So the exposure for that is completely different than dealing with RAW. We're going to get into that. There's a reason why I said that. Okay, so recording with a Red camera. For instance, I have mine right here. As you see, it's really bright. It's really, really bright. That's because I have it pointing towards a light source. So if I was to bring it down ever so slightly, it's going to look a little different. And if I play with the aperture a bit, focus this, as you see, it looks a bit better. Let me take you over to the settings. So here are the settings. I'm using my iPad and Red Control app. So if you look at these right here, as you see, they're jumping. That's the exposure graph. And as you see on those three little dots at the bottom, is that the bottom or the top? I think that's the bottom. Anyways, you see those three little red dots? Those are your traffic lights. Now, Red has a really good system for exposing. Most cameras that you use, like your FX6, FX30, would have the graph above, like the histogram. And you would expose and keep that graph in between. If it goes too low, it would be crushing your blacks. If it goes too high, you'll be blowing out your highlights. You don't really have to pay that much attention to that. Yes, you do when it comes to recording raw. But you see these traffic lights right here? These are the things that tells you everything you need to know. Now, if the traffic lights below the line are lighting up, that means you're going to the dark side. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're clipping. It just means that you're going more underexposed. And if your traffic lights are lit up above the line, it means you're a bit overexposed. It doesn't mean you're blowing out the highlights. It just means you are a little bit overexposed. Now, if none of these lights are going off, you are fine. Now, why is that important? It's important when you're recording raw. Now, for all of my photographers, you guys know what I'm talking about when it comes to raw. With raw, you don't have to get the perfect exposure because all of that information is being retained inside of the raw file. That's why raw files are so big, because it holds a lot more information than a compressed file like a JPEG. With JPEG, you got to get everything right, because when you take it, you can't really edit it in post because you'll be destroying the photo. With raw, not too much, not so at all. The same thing applies to video. I mostly record in raw when it comes to R3D or Red Raw. Yes, it's massive, but I have the storage and etc. and I prepare for it. The beautiful thing is that if the traffic lights are just not all the way up, talking about overexposure, like for instance, let me push this. And let me tilt this up, point to the light. As you see, look at the traffic lights. The traffic lights are moving up because I exposed it. Well, not exposed. I turned the aperture ring all the way to T1.5, so I'm letting in the most light, and I'm pointing it to a direct light source. So those traffic lights are going all the way above. It's a little too much above than I would like, but I can do things like hit the ISO at 1000, and that would actually, me bumping up the ISO would actually preserve the highlights. A lot of you guys are probably thinking, what do you mean? If I'm turning up the ISO, I'm letting in more light. I'm increasing the sensitivity of the sensor. And that's gonna make it even more blown out. It's not really the case when it comes to Red. The higher the ISO, the more of the highlights you preserve. Now, if I'm shooting in daytime, I will put the ISO probably at 1000. Or maybe 1280. so I can preserve all of those highlights if I'm shooting outdoors. I know it probably is a head scratcher for those of you that are shooting mirrorless and etc. This is completely madness what I'm talking about, because as you have learned, if you take up the ISO, you're increasing the sensitivity of the image and you might actually lose information. But this is not a mirrorless camera. Technically it is, but it's not the conventional mirrorless camera like your Sony is and your Canons and etc. This is actually shifting middle gray. So what is middle gray when it comes to the Red camera? Middle gray is the point where you are starting from ground zero. So ground zero, think of it as like a line. Like ISO 800, you have perfect balance between the highlights and the shadows. Now, if I put the ISO at 1000, I'm preserving a bit more highlights at the sacrifice of getting rid of some of the shadows. So wherever middle gray goes, like think of this as the lowest point for the shadows, and this is middle gray. So wherever middle gray goes, the shadows will be more preserved or more details will be lost from it. That's the easiest way to explain it. If you need more clarification, comment down in that comment section. And that's right below the subscribe button and right below the like button. And I'm going to get back to you with a bit more information on that. But that's what you need to know when it comes to middle gray. So now, if I was to record this at ISO 1280, in post, I can actually change the ISO value in post. So that's why these raw files are so massive, because you can do a bunch of this in post. So that's when it comes to recording. Let me put this back to ISO 800. Kelvin is the same thing. That's your color temperature. You can also change this in post as well when it comes to recording, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Let's go back. MQ, LQ, that's just compression. HQ is the highest, the lowest compression. And that's where your files is going to be massive. You should only use HQ if you're like doing virtual production and etc. MQ is what I usually shoot at. You can also shoot at LQ if you're like doing corporate interviews, sit downs, and etc. But I like a little extra detail, so I shoot MQ preference. Okay, so that's when it comes to recording. When it comes to streaming now, streaming is kind of different. Not kind of different. Streaming is a lot different when it comes to shooting on Reds. All of this stuff, like your ISO and your exposure, it matters when you're streaming. Let me get my terminology so I don't confuse you guys. So you would treat this Red the same way you would treat a mirrorless camera when you're recording. What do I mean by that? So in a regular mirrorless camera, you would set your ISO, you would set your shutter speed, and you will set the exposure perfectly when you're shooting, so everything is better, and so you don't clip the highlights and crush the blacks and etc. You do the same thing when it comes to streaming with a red. Let me see how I can make this more simple. Let me see. Okay, so see this right here that I'm pressing? This histogram and these traffic lights are way more important when it comes to streaming. So for instance, if I'm streaming, I am not recording anything. So the image that is coming from the red, that's what is going to the switcher, whether it's Blackmagic or whatever type of switcher you're using. And that will be pushed out to the online community. So what you're seeing right now with that light looking extra bright, that's what the online community would see. And that's not what you want. So you would actually have to bring this down a bit. And of course, your director will be looking at the screen to do like the switching between cameras and etc. So he'll tell you if it's too bright or if it's too dark or whatever. If the color needs to be adjusting, he'll be telling you that. So let me bring this up a bit. It's still a bit too overexposed. Like the green is like really shooting up, but I would bring this down until nothing is being overexposed, and then I would actually bring up the ISO to match. So yeah, bring up the ISO of the overall image. Let's see. I wouldn't really go past 1600. Yeah. So you see, by me just bringing up the ISO, it's not affecting the exposure whatsoever. It's just bringing up the light of the overall image. Let's do 12. But yeah, something like this, I would actually add more light to the surrounding areas so it isn't crazy. Does that look crazy? Let me full screen it. Do you see noise? I see a bit of noise. Yeah, it is what it is, but I can see the detail in the LED lights though, I ain't gonna lie. That looks a bit lovely. All right, cool. Let's look at something else. Bring this down. Boom. Okay, so as you see, since I'm not pointing into direct light, my exposure completely shifted. Like the red is completely crushed. I still got some information in the green and the blue, but the red is like completely crushed. So what I'll do for this is adjust the aperture ring. Bring that up a bit. And look at that. Up a bit. Boom. There are no traffic lights going off. That actually is perfectly exposed. So if I do a little focus, sheesh. That's a bad monitor, I must say. All right. So this is another thing. This is another difference between cinema cameras and mirrorless cameras. So you see this right here? This is shutter angle. So mirrorless cameras have something you call shutter speed. So if I'm shooting 23 frames per second, well, 24 frame, 23.98, which is what you see right here in the corner. Boom. If I'm shooting that with a regular mirrorless camera that has shutter speed, I will double that. That way the movement is a bit more smoother and it isn't as jarring, because you don't want jarring for online streaming. So you will double that, and most mirrorless cameras, they do 1/50. They don't really do 1/48. So if yours do 1/48, that's what you would set it to. And the same thing if you're shooting like 30 frames per second. I wouldn't really shoot 60 frames per second. The movement isn't as natural with 60 frames per second. There isn't a lot of motion blur. Yeah, I'll show you an example right after this, between 60 frames per second and 24 frames per second. So the thing is, with a mirrorless camera, whatever you set it to, whether it is 23, 47, 71, or whatever your shutter speed is on your camera, you will have to go in. Whatever your frames per second is on your camera, you will have to go in and manually adjust the shutter speed to suit. So if you set it to 60 frames per second, you have to go into the shutter and set it to 120. And you have to do that over and over. But the thing is, with a cinema camera, whatever you set this to, as long as the shutter angle is at 180, it automatically doubles it. So you don't have to go in and set the shutter whatsoever. That's the cool thing. So you just set it at 180 one time, and you can change your frame rate to be whatsoever you want it to be. So 180 is the normal thing for motion blur. As you see, look at my hand. As you see, there's regular motion blur when I'm moving it quickly. That's normal. That's what your eye normally sees. So if you were to wave your hand in front of your eyes, you're going to see some blur but in between your fingers. That's normal. That's what your eye is accustomed to. That's what your eye sees in real life. And that's what we want to mimic. The issue with that is, now if you are shooting or if you're streaming and you're pointing towards a LED wall, you will get something called the moire effect. And the moire effect is that you will see lines on the LED wall going up and down, and it's going to look a little weird. If you are shooting 23 frames per second and you point it towards a fluorescent light, like one of those fluorescent lights that are in the ceiling, you might see the flickers as well. To fix that, you will set your shutter angle to 172.8 degrees. And that will cut out the moire effect for LED wall, and it will cut out the flickering for a fluorescent light. Very cool. Very nice. Let me put that back to 180 because, yeah. Or not? No? I'm using this red app. Still needs a little work. So it connects to the red wirelessly using, I have like a router that's just for connecting my red cameras to the iPad, and I can control all of them using this one iPad and this app. So I can control all the settings. I can record in all of them at the same time. So yeah, I just got to walk around with my iPad and set all the settings to them. for them, and yeah, it's great when it works properly. So yeah, hopefully you guys were able to understand the difference between shooting or recording on a Red and streaming on a Red. They're kind of similar, but very different. I know that's an oxymoron. Similar meaning that you will look at the traffic lights to determine your exposure, see if you're overexposed or underexposed, but different in that when you're recording, you can be a little overexposed or a little underexposed, and you can fix that in post. Versus when you're streaming, you got to get everything right because it's live. Whatever you're sending to the switcher is going out online. So you got to get that stuff right. So yeah, that's the big difference between both of them, and it's not that difficult. Many people think the more expensive the camera, the more technical it becomes, or the more difficult it is to understand. That's actually the complete opposite. Reason being, like the Arri Alexa. The Arri Alexa is one of the most expensive cameras that you can buy. Like that camera is, a lot of my viewers probably don't even know how much an Arri Alexa costs. Hold on, let me show you firsthand. Because I have a B&H corporate account. So, for instance, if you would to go on B&H and look at a Alexa 35. Let me switch this real quick. Boom. You won't be able to see the price of the Alexa 35. Reason being that this is for what they call studio professional customers. Meaning the average person that isn't into cameras is going to see this price and is going to be saying within themselves, why is a camera so much money? I can do this, I can do that. If you're asking those kind of questions, this camera just isn't for you. Just don't look at it. But my viewers are a little bit different. My viewers are those who are already into this stuff, or they want to get into this stuff. So this is what you call the creme de la creme right here. Hold on, let me log in first so you guys can, whoa, wrong switch. Boom, hit that. Let me log in first. I don't need you guys to see my email. All right, cool. Let's go back. Wrong switch. All right, cool. So, as you see, all of that stuff that you saw before is gone for studio and professional buyers, because I've spent quite a bit of money with B&H, so I get access to all these prices. So see this? This is just for the body. $86,520. And that's not even including the stuff to run the camera. So stuff like this, like the set, like the lightweight set, this is what you need. No, not even, because you still need the media to actually record the information. So this is what you need right here. The lightweight with CCM1. So add this, $107,000 and $10. Can't forget the $10. $107,000 and $10. And oh yeah, you also need a lens kit. These don't use regular what does like E-mount. It doesn't use E-mount, it doesn't use RF, it doesn't use EF. These use LPL, lock-in PL, not regular PL, lock-in PL. So You either got to get a adapter, which is PL to LPL, so you can use regular PL lenses, or just get LPL lenses, which is a crazy price that you have to pay for a lens. But that's where the law of diminishing return comes in. You pay like 90% more money just to get 10% increase. But once you see that 10% increase, depending on if this is your field and you have the clientele to help pay for this equipment, then it makes sense. All that to say, this camera is OD expensive. This camera is like the price of a house, some houses. And you would think that this camera is probably really technical to use. Nope. This is one of the most simplest cameras to use. Like the menu is simple. It's very intuitive and it's very easy to operate. The reason being, if you're using a camera like this and you're on a big production set, time is more valuable than any amount of money. So the less time that you spend fiddling around with settings and etc., you can actually get work done. So that's the ideology of a lot of these higher end cameras and etc. They put everything you need in the forefront when it comes to settings and operation and etc. And so you can just get the work done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Yeah, and plus these cameras aren't run and gun type of cameras. These cameras are made to be built out, and it's made to be used with a team. Like, so if you're a run and gun videographer that shoots weddings, this isn't for you. This is not for you whatsoever. Go to a different channel. But this is for a team of like what, 10 and up. Like you get your grapher, that's the person who handles the lights. You get your AC, your first and second AC. That's your focus puller, as well as the person who changes the lens and etc. You get your camera operator. Now, camera operator is the only, he doesn't deal with focus pulling. He doesn't deal with all of that stuff. He just deals with getting the shots. And you got your director, you got your producer, it's a full team in order to use this camera. So this isn't for like your average Joe. Let me clear my cart before these guys think that, before these guys actually think I'm actually trying to buy this stuff. I keep switching on the wrong thing because I'm using my Blackmagic to switch cameras and Ecamm to actually switch the slides. So let me remove that and let me remove that. Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, that's about it. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something. Yeah, and if you are into doing corporate events and if you want your corporate event to be streamed, let me know, because I can come in with my reds and your event will look really good. Completely overkill. Completely overkill. But you can just send me a comment or send me a message and we can make it happen. But the thing is, I do actually stream with these. I would stream with these with like higher paying clients, or if I'm with churches and etc. Certain events. They will be for concerts as well. Podcasts, I would use podcasts with these as well. I use these for everything: recording, streaming. Whatever needs a camera, I try to use it because the image looks oh so good And especially if you pair it with a good cinema lens, beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. And if you have any questions or any tests that you want me to do with these cameras, let me know and I'll get back to you. And more than likely, I'll post those tests that you want me to do. So have a good night, guys. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.